Welcome, everyone, to the SMEEA Podcast. My name is Jose Rodriguez, your third vice president. Today, we are going to be joined by David Goldberg. He is the president of the California Teachers Association. David is going to talk a little bit about the transformative power of community schools for our students, for our communities. But before we begin, just a little housekeeping. You can find these interviews on YouTube, where we hope you will like and subscribe. But the audio versions of these interviews are available wherever you listen to podcasts. We hope that you will find these interviews informative and enjoyable. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. All right, welcome everyone to the third episode of the SMEEA Podcast. We are joined now via the magic of Zoom with David Goldberg, the president of CTA, which is an organization that includes over 310 members across 1,100 affiliates across the great state of California. And David, you've been president for just over 2 years, and previously you were vice president for 2 terms. And like I said before we started here, we've met several times. I've been so honored to meet you and heard your speeches over the years. Such a big fan of yours.
No, it's mutual. Thank you, Jose. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm going in. I haven't yet finished my about a year and a half in, and we have 310,000 members, as you said, and across nearly over 1,000 locals across California. So we're 1 out of 8 students in this nation are in school in California. So our numbers are big. Our economy is huge. We're the 5th biggest economy in the world in California for our own nation. So the scale of what we're trying to do here is really important. Yeah, beyond just even California.
Yeah, we're the biggest, affiliate, right, of NEA as well.
By far, yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Go California.
That's right.
So before we dive in, there's a lot of news happening, as you're aware, public education news under the Trump administration. So before we dive in and talk about community schools, I kind of wanted to get your feedback on what's happening with the Trump administration's assault on the Department of Education, recent news that they're requiring SEAs, LEAs to certificate that they've ended DEI programs. Kind of, what's your feedback to that?
Yeah, it's part of a constant attack since the Trump and Musk administration has come into office to really basically sow fear, uncertainty, and doubt around public education and just continue to attack us. These the programs are going after. Federal funding is a small part of the overall budget for public education, but when we've been on basically survival mode and funding for public education for decades, it matters a lot. And it's targeted. A lot of the programs that are targeted, for example, the most recent attacks, they're targeting Title I funding, which goes to our most vulnerable students, plays for kind of programs frankly, these are the same kind of programs that have been attacked by these same groups of folks for decades since these programs were brought into existence. And it took struggle to bring in Title I funding, to bring in stuff around the IDEA, to bring in support for special ed. So we have 800,000 special ed students. These attacks are really, and by the way, this is not a blue or red issue. There are students across our state, or especially, they don't care if their county voted for Trump or anyone else, but it's a devastating attack. And it's trying to, using these cultural narratives to basically undermine support for public education. What this is really leading to, by the way, is paving the way for huge tax cuts for these corporations and for billionaires again. They want to balance the backs on the backs of working people. That's how they want to balance their budgets. And then, so there's a Senate can't take our eye off the ball on that, but it's also, in the meantime, these attacks are just vicious.
Yeah, it's been really hard to watch as a public educator, and it's hard as an association to stand against these things without people thinking, oh, the association is being political. It's not being political. This is totally to defend public education and defend our students.
Right. Yeah. And we're trying for California, for CTA, we're having to fight now. Normally, we didn't take on federal issues. Normally, that would be our NEA. But we know that we have to, frankly. On May 17th coming up, we're going to have a big day of action all across the state. We're going to have 5 sites in San Francisco and Sacramento and Los Angeles and San Diego, and where we're going to target federal buildings as targets to really just manifest our telling them to take their hands off public education. This is an attack on us, an attack on our students, our most vulnerable students. So we're also part of that. We're also going to be targeting Congress people, in this case, Republican Congress people, and showing them that, look, you are voting against your own constituents when you approve this, and we're not going to give you a pass here in California. You're going to have to be held accountable, and we're going to try to bring people to meet with them and try to push them to move away from these really vicious attacks.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, and our association will in any way support and promote those efforts. So thank you. I invited you to join our podcast today to talk about community schools because our association, our district, we're just now in the starting the implementation phase of this program, and right now we are trying to build member support. We're educating folks, and so that's why I have you, and I've invited other speakers to join us to kind of share what it is, because we still have members who don't even know what community schools are. So maybe you could just take a minute and kind of just define community schools. What are they?
Yeah. The good thing, by the way, on this is some of the definition we actually really struggled around, and you can actually see it in the state framework around community schools. We actually have a very good state framework around this. But the community schools framework, oftentimes people see community schools as just wraparound services, very narrowly focused. The community schools model that we're uplifting in California, and this came out of struggle too, where we had locals going on strike to win these a few years ago before we got this funding. But it's about curriculum. It's about what it looks like in the classroom. It's about having educators and parents and students actually help develop. So it's been, for example, some places it's been one angle by which they've really brought in ethnic studies, but not just that, but even broader, like saying, there's a great publication that UCLA Community Schools put out where they looked at community school classrooms, where they show this model of how, like, the science classes are interviewing their community members about what are the needs they have about global warming or how it's impacting what are the questions they have. And then they do their research in the science class about those issues. Then they go back to the community and present it. It's trying to really bridge and make our schools a resource to the community, not just around resources, around mental health stuff and nurses and counselors, but also around education. It's also about, at the very core of it, is democratic decision making. We're really pushing that every community school should have a community school steering committee. Every district should have a steering committee. The steering committee should be jointly chaired by the union, parents, and the district themselves. Most districts just absolutely skip over that step and don't do any of it. It's all top down. So we're really uplifting not just the idea of community schools, but the model of community schools that actually can be transformative. One that So then we're lucky we have some models that are. I don't know if you all maybe have gone out to Anaheim. Where we have a whole kind of incubator, a whole kind of really showing people what it looks like when the union is behind this, when the parents are connected, when the district is open to it, in a way that really builds some very powerful models. But most models across the state, frankly, are not leaning into that. They're just taking this money. It's just another program. It's just another top-down thing, which means that our members often just find it okay, or frankly, sometimes reject it as another thing because it's not creating the kind of political power and the democratic structures to really support it. So we're really leaning in. We have monthly meetings with folks who are really trying to lean into this. We have also trainings we do every summer at the Summer Institute, where people are really developing some capacity. A lot of the initial effort, frankly, is organizing power. A lot of it is really creating demands and putting enough pressure to put on the district to carve out a space for our union and our educators and our parents to have a voice at the table. So we've had model MOU language as well or unions have one MOU language that kind of creates space for them and the parents and the voices in it. Otherwise, it just becomes administrators at districts, even well-meaning administrators, who are just given this assignment, and it gets so disconnected from what really happens at our classroom. It really needs to be parent and community and educator and union driven. The most effective models are really when the union is in the driver's seat, because we're the really only one who has capacity to really kind of, the structures to kind of really push this. But we're a long way from making that happen. And it's still, as you say, even in your local, it's still a process, and we honor that process. We also really want to see this as something to continue to organize around.
Yeah, and that's the challenge. Or there's organizing for power, and with that power, really leveraging that to get districts to really honor the purpose of community schools, which is, like you said, the democratic, really the really important democratic principle, or the pillar of it. I wanted to ask you, I was reading a little bit about you before we had this started our Zoom here. You were an activist since you were a kid, and you organized a Kids Against Nukes march.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of just wondering, like, how do you see this fight for community schools as a continuation of like what you've been doing since you were a kid?
Yeah, I have indeed been active my whole life. I think that Kids Against Nukes thing, I think I was like 9 or 10. Later, I was very active, and and I grew up. I'm older than you, obviously, but I grew up in the Reagan years, where there was a lot of, similar to now, a lot of kind of pushing back around a lot of the gains that had happened in the 60s and 70s, kind of rolling back and attacking of workers' rights, attacking of rights of women's rights, attacking of people of color rights. And so there wasn't, kind of similar, wasn't a single movement, but there was lots of movements. I also got very active in the anti-apartheid movement in middle school and high school, and then later there was some support around ACT UP and some of the gay and lesbian and LGBTQ plus movement, which was also at a really critical moment there, around specifically around AIDS and really fighting for people's lives. And then throughout this, my whole life, I've been active. At some point, I also decided I'm going to be not just an activist, but a unionist. And that's a little bit different, where you bring people along in a more deliberate kind of way. And you really kind of make sure you're responsive to what's going on at school sites. And we've really, this year in our union, we've really, since I've been elected, we've really focused on building democratic structure at school sites as a way. And look, we may not even, the only thing we all have in common is we're all hired by the same employer. We may not have the same politics, but we do believe in public education. We believe our students deserve the best. We do believe we deserve to be respected. And so how do we then have conversations and build momentum around those issues, which then, of course, can lead to some of the bigger issues. Like right now, we protect our students. That means when our students are under attack and being viciously attacked, and their families around some of this ICE stuff, it's not just, or anti-immigrant stuff. We start with what it means to be an ally to our students, right? Doesn't necessarily mean we start with the purely political, but we start with how do we build a shield around our students and support them. So I've really been, since I've been a unionist, as my main thing, and really trying to have deep political conversations, but also have it through the lens of really building support for our union and what it represents. Let me stop there. I could talk more, but I want to, don't want to fill here. Yeah.
And so you see all of that as like leading to community schools now. That's like your next.
Well, community schools has a very particular role, because California, if you look at the historical ways, California, I'm also, by the way, a third generation teacher. So my grandmother went on strike in 1970 to help found my union, UTLA. My mom went on strike in 89 as a strike captain. And then it was my turn. I went on strike twice now. 2019, I think 23 as a UTLA member, along with my wife, who's also a UTLA member. So there's a lot of things to struggle. So you take this long-term view of it. Like, I know the education system my grandma worked in was an education system that was built basically for white migrants who were fleeing the Dust Bowl and the Great Recession coming to California. And we provided the best education system in the world. K through 12 with the lowest class sizes. We also provided free UCs, free Cal States. We invented the community college system. So we had built this whole system on that for decades. And then that went away in the 70s when it wasn't migrants coming to California. California was leading the world in immigration to our state. And so there's some real, and the way they did it was Prop 13, where they said they were freezing property taxes for little old ladies who are losing their houses. But we all get reassessed if we're lucky enough, and so few people can even buy a house in California. But these huge corporations like Disneyland and Chevron are paying 1978 taxes. So they never get reassessed. So the entire infrastructure we had built for students, for white migrant students, has now gone away over these last decades. And it had some and it was clear then, there's some very racist implications of why that went away. A disinvestment. It was at the time when people were really, after Brown versus Board of Education, all these people were pushing around laws for more equal funding. And people just said, we're going to disinvest, we're going to leave these inner cities. And so it became a white flight happened, and it became a real, so our struggle around public education at its core is a struggle around economic equality. It is a struggle around taking on racism. It is a struggle around saying our students matter, that we as workers, we're also a profession that is 75% women. It's saying that women's work matters and should be valued. And so the activism part is still there, but it's now part of a broader movement also around a union movement, around workers' rights and students' rights as well.
I love that. Thank you. That's so true. I don't want to just be seen as an activist. It's like they kind of are married together, the union part, the activist part. And it's not for selfish reasons. It's
right.
Yeah. You mentioned the word democratic, and we had Grant Schuster on last week, and he also used the word democratic. And Grant Schuster, of course, the former ASTA, Anaheim Secondary Teachers Association president. And he also used the word democratic. And so I'm just wondering, we're in a very vulnerable state in our democracy here. So how much more important, I guess, now are community schools in this time?
Yeah. And also, I guess, answering part of let me connect that to part of your last question I didn't answer as well, is why community schools are so important in this particular moment. And it's one is around democracy. There are so few examples of people working together. And frankly, schools are a place where we would hope that can be. Schools are being I don't want to discount that schools and school boards are being very much politicized intentionally in California. But I think that it's also can be a place where people really lean into something, where people really lean into creating democratic structures. That's why, frankly, we got to first model this as well in our union. The other thing about community schools that they offer us, though, is when people are constantly saying education's a failure, education doesn't work, or we need to privatize, because that's always the other side of a lot of the stuff, is we need to just charterize everything or give the money to private schools. What community schools can be is they can be something that we say, we know, because it's easy to get boxed in for us as educators, and people care about the system of public education, like we're defending the status quo. And frankly, we know the status quo doesn't work for us at all either. We know painfully more than anywhere else that our students and our members are not getting what they need. But we also have something that pushes back, like around community schools and aspirational, that has democracy at its core, that has equality at its core, that has a value for our voices as educators, for our students and their communities, to actually not just fight back, but actually fight forward and say, we want to uplift this model. So that's why around democracy, but even broader around models of public schooling that are successful and that work. And that's why we have to work so hard in our public schools to create community schools and really honor this model. Because if we don't, frankly, we're vulnerable to saying 3 years from now that community schools was a disaster. It didn't work, right? And that's why it's really important for unions to really lean into this and get trained. Any union who wants to engage with this, CTA has made a commitment to support you. And you brought up Grant Schuster, who you talked to last time. They've created a whole incubator that people can go visit them. We have monthly meetings. We have trainings in the summer. We have a whole group of people who are really invested in using this, but also clear this is going to be something we have to organize around. And some unions are still, a lot of unions are still really figuring out what it means in this modern world to be organizing, and how do we use this model of community schools as something to really use that as something to uplift as a chance to do that.
Thank you. I that kind of dovetails nicely into my next question, which you kind of answered a little bit. So as we look around the state of California, you're the CTA president. You have a great vantage point. What are models? And it sounds like ASTA is a model. So what are they doing that maybe as we look forward, what are they doing that we can kind of learn from?
Yeah, so the models we see, first of all, some of the early models were models that came out of struggle. I mentioned earlier some of the strikes, like UTLA went on strike, and frankly, this is in 2019. The district had already settled around salary and healthcare, and thought that the union's never going to be able to strike around these other issues, which they put on peripheral. But UTLA said we're going to strike around community schools. We're going to strike around counselors and nurses. We're going to strike around our students having access to curriculum around ethnic studies. And so it really changed and so the strike, they were also to win, like, for example, a steering committee at the district level that is jointly chaired by the union and community and the district. So part of it came out of struggle. The other places like ASTA, who came on later, they worked. This was part of really flexing their muscle of organizing and really put a lot of energy around this. They also, like, for example, the community school meetings in ASTA, the district comes to the union. That's where they've all happened. The ASTA has also really created some very ASTA, Anaheim, by the way, I'm saying that for short, because they also have met strong coalitions with parents. And the interesting thing about Anaheim as well is that they found out is that we've also really pushed to have our community school coordinators be our members, because for a number of reasons. One is that they're connected to this struggle that we're waging. The other thing is that oftentimes when it's not our members, oftentimes community schools just become like an after school program, right? When we really want to do community school classrooms, we want to build it deep, then we have to really have our members engaged with it deeply. So the community school coordinators is a really important way to do that. But they have community school coordinators at all their schools, and what they found is it's just brought a whole new group of people into their union work who wouldn't have considered themselves union activists, but now are 100% engaged with the union or through community schools. So it's also another way to really change, similar to what UTLA did, where the strike brought in a whole different group of people who said, you know what, this is my community. I'm willing to fight for my community around these issues as well. And so it's really transformed what it means to be a union. But the ones every single successful model that we have is being driven, frankly, by the union, along with others. But the union there's not a single model in this state where we have a transformative model where the union is not deeply engaged in this work. It doesn't mean that everyone where the union is engaged, that they've won it still. There's still big battles. But that is, wherever it is successful, that is what they all have in common. Again, we have a long way to go, but we're really also building step by step as well, and really being supportive of people on this journey.
Yeah, and that's why it's so critical for us, as you know, we're organizing around this right now. Actually, our school district's coordinator of community schools is our former union president, Jose Segura. I'm sure you're aware of him. He went to the district and applied and got the job. So now we know we've got a solid partner over there in that regards. And then those we have monthly meetings as well via Zoom with people like Aisha. I think it's just for Region 3.
Right, that's great.
And then we want to get a team together with the district to go down to Anaheim and check out what they have there.
That's great. Yeah, that can be oftentimes a way to really jumpstart this. You should get it signed up soon, because they have, I think, they're added another session, but they do fill up. Because people are actually, frankly, are coming from all over the country to those. It's an NEA-funded program, and people, because of California's impact nationwide and the way that, again, I don't ever want to oversell it, but the way that there's other places, for example, in Maryland, where overnight they said every single school is a community school without any infrastructure, without anything being built, without any engagement with the union, the community, and then nothing changes. And then they say, oh, that didn't work. And California would be more deliberate about it. And Anaheim is a great hub for people from all over the country coming to look at models that work.
Yeah, I think Grant said in the last episode, you got to go you got to go slow to go fast.
Right.
I think that's a good approach. Just like you
Right.
said, just being deliberate. And I've taken so much of your time. I've one last one if you have a
Yeah.
minute. As you know, we have people in our association who might be tempted to see this as just one more program that's top down. Maybe just quickly, what advice do you have for us, or words of encouragement you might have for us as we try to educate our members about this program? Like why it's
Yeah. Look,
necessary.
yeah. Look, and if it is just one more program, frankly, you should reject it. I think that this program, where it works, really has spoken to members. The reason why people went into education, the fact that you can push and have a say around curricular stuff, that you can push and have a say around what democracy and decision making at school sites, the way that you can push and make sure students get their needs met in different ways, and that you're part of a broader movement around public education. I think really can is for those people where it's worked. It's been for some of them life changing, frankly, and one of the most exciting parts of their career. But it's hard, and I don't want to overstate it. And it is, as you say, Grant said, a lot of it's building connections one on one. It's trying to figure out, build capacity, build that strength to build. Because it sounds like you got a supportive person in your district. That's great, but that is not going to lead this. It's going to have to be really your union who decides they want to take this up and lead this, because we're really, frankly, the only one who has the capacity and the critical infrastructure to actually make that happen. So I think we're here to support you. If there's questions along the way, if there's things you need support on, if you need us to come talk, this is a great platform to do this. If you need us to come out and talk, lay it out more, we're all in, because this is, as you said earlier, this is the same reason I was in Kids Against Nukes, the same reason I did the stuff around anti-apartheid. It's just a belief in the ability of everyday people to kind of change our lives and change the conditions under which we live. And this is a chance to do that in a really exciting place in our education system.
Thank you. So, yeah, thank you, David. I got goosebumps. Like I said at the beginning, huge fan of yours. I'm so glad that you made time for us, and I'm sorry that I've taken more time than I promised at the
I'm
outset.
honored to be here. Appreciate you doing this. It's a great way to everyone in a movement. Everyone has a different role. This is a great role you're stepping into. It's great.
Thank you, and I will definitely be in touch if I need help or advice.
Please.
Yeah, the
Please.
struggle continues. It certainly
Yeah.
does. Thank you so much, David. Have a great
Okay.
day, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're well.
All right, thank you again to David Goldberg, our CTA president, for making time for our humble little podcast. I hope that was informative, and I hope that this will inspire you to become more active and more involved in community schools as we start to roll that out in SMBSD. And please don't forget to like and to subscribe if you are watching us on the YouTubes. And please, please, please follow us wherever you happen to listen to podcasts. All right, guys, the struggle continues. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next episode.